Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our Training Industry Leader Talk, Preparing Leaders to Lead Through Change. This event is brought to us by Impact, the Regis Company, CLS, GP Strategies, and Canvas. I'm Elizabeth. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Training Industry, and I'm happy to be with you all today. Our next session is with Impact, and they're going to be talking about helping leaders turn constant change into confident everyday action. Before we get started, I do just have a few housekeeping items to review to help us get the most out of our time with us. Throughout today's event, please feel free to use the chat for any comments you have and submit your questions in our Q&A panel. We'll do our best to address your questions throughout the session or at the end during our Q&A time. Once the session ends, a brief survey will appear in your browser. Please feel free to share any feedback you have about the session or today's event. All of our sessions are being recorded and will be archived on trainingindustry.com. You'll receive a follow-up email from us with a link to those sessions that you can review again later. If this is your first Training Industry event, a special welcome goes out to you. Training Industry exists to make connections among learning and development professionals. We offer resources to support your role in L&D, like live events, like today's Leader Talk, for example. We have lots of articles on our website and in our magazine. We publish research reports, host monthly podcasts. We'd love to see you at one of our in-person conferences. And we do have a membership community where you can connect even further with peers, access some exclusive resources, and get AI-powered support. We'd also love to hear what you learned from today's session on social media, so follow along with us there on your favorite platforms. And now, without any further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our speakers for this session. We have Dom Fitch and Stephen Nishida. Dom is head of creative change at Impact, where he partners with people, teams, and organizations to bring strategy to life and catalyze meaningful change. Dom designs large-scale interventions that help groups engage with strategy, communicate change, and accelerate leadership and learning at the heart of transformation. And Stephen is a skilled learning and change specialist. Having lived and worked across the US and Japan, Stephen is now based in Los Angeles. With a diverse career spanning academia, languages, and learning and development, he now serves as global practice lead and senior consultant for Impact US. Dom and Steve, I am going to hand this off to you.
Received gratefully. Thank you very much, Elizabeth.
Thanks,
hello.
Elizabeth.
A very warm welcome to everybody who is listening in today. If it's not obvious already because of my accent, I'm joining you today from the UK, but I do have a global role here at Impact. It's really hot today in the UK. We are in the midst of a heat wave, so forgive me if I keep having to take my glasses off and give them a little wipe around. We are delighted to be here today. One of the things that we wanted to do is share some stories, really, share some ideas with you. We've titled our session today, Helping Leaders Turn the Constant Change into Confident Everyday Action. So we very much hope that today we're going to share with you not just stories of how we're working, but some ideas, some things that will be useful for you in the flow of your work when you're focusing on the changes that you're going through in your organizations, some tools, some tips, some things that you can take away. But before we even get started, before we do anything, we are hoping, as we say, this will feel quite conversational and not just Steve and I talking to one another, but utilizing some of our chat functionality, bringing you into the conversation as well. We aren't going to be doing any polling or interactive things like that, but we are hoping to utilize the chat. So as a first invitation, I'm sure you've probably done some of this already with previous speakers, people who have been with you. They've asked you to open it up. Maybe they've asked you to sort of type in, where you're dialing from, what organization you're from. I'm going to assume that you might have done that already, or that. It's certainly data we can gather after the event. So I'm going to ask you perhaps something a bit different that you've been asked today, which is, I love when we get on these sort of calls, to be able to complete it as a bit of a hive mind to sort of go, right, what's currently good in your world? What are some of the things that you're finding that are really sparking your interest that you're curious about? So, in terms of things to do in the cultural sphere, it might be a book that you've read, it might be a movie that you've seen, something that you're watching at the moment on the TV, a top tip, a recommendation. I'm simply going to share this. If you've not come across this book already, it's called Glorious Exploits by Ferdia Lennon. It's a phenomenal story. It's a really great book all about some slaves in Sicily who are brought together to put on an ancient Greek play. So open up the chat, please, from where you are. Book recommendations, something you've watched in the movies at the moment, top tips, something you're consuming at pace in the world of box sets, things that you're looking at online. Please feel free to type that into the chat. Otherwise, it's just me talking into the air. There we go. Thank you, Catherine.
That's great.
If you've not seen it already, I'm
Stadium
going to.
drills. Strong ground. Yeah, go ahead.
There we go.
Oh, good. Mindset. Yep. Classic.
Yeah, here they're all coming in now.
Trusted learning advisor. Yes.
Midnight Library I read earlier this year. It's wicked, isn't it? It's really good. Any movies
Rereading the Iliad. Yeah.
in the cinema, anything you've gone to watch there? Minions and Monsters is a top tip for me. Yes, I have young children, but it is definitely not a kids' film. It's had me laughing my head off. It's one of the best, funniest films I've seen all year.
Mhm.
Hey, thanks, Beth. It's good film recommendation there coming in as well. And what I'd encourage you all to do, don't just make this about you, because I bet none of you have really taken the time properly to go back and scan maybe and read what other people have done. In fact, that's a hideous, glaring thing that I've just said. I bet some of you have. But if you haven't done, take a look through, because I bet there's some good recommendations in there for you as well, something that you can take away with you. Another thing that maybe a lot of us have all been watching and tapping into at the moment is, of course, the World Cup. And I'm going to go there a bit contentiously and say it's the World Cup of football, because that's the correct use of the word, because I'm from England and I get to say that. But yeah, I hope some of you have been enjoying that as much as us. And I am being a bit jokey on purpose to talk about the fact that it is, of course, football, because little thing just off the bat, and I've just been listening into Mike's previous session. Words matter, don't they? We bandy around words, and they mean different things in different contexts. And I guess one of the things that we are aware of is that during moments of change, during when we're working in organizations, the language that we use is so important, because we assume certain things mean things to everybody, and we fall into these traps of sort of sometimes working with these phrases, and they're both brilliant and sort of really unhelpful at the same time. I find, when we say stuff like we're building the plane whilst we're in flight. So many times in the work we do, we work with organizations who tell us that that's what we're doing. And, I get that, but also it doesn't mean anything really, unless we kind of fundamentally kind of really drill down into what we actually mean specifically there. So little point just off the sub about language as well. Anyway, I'm talking for too long, so let me get into the meat of what we're here to do today. Let's keep this chat going. Already great to see that people are interacting with one another. France v England World Cup final. John, I'm with you. Let's go. So we are from Impact. So wanting to share, first of all, this is my screen's coming through. Steve, just give me a nod.
Yep.
We're in.
You're on the title screen. Yep.
Most wonderful. Well, let me take. So you know a bit about me, and Steve, you know about the book that I've been reading recently and some of the films. But let me tell you a little bit about Impact if you're not familiar with us. Impact are an organisation who were founded in 1980 in the beautiful Lake District, if you know that, in the UK. But we are now a global organisation working across the Americas, EMEA, and Asia Pacific. And at the heart of what we do really since the 1980s, right the way up to what we do now, is we're interested in the idea of liberating human potential, the idea of really thinking about how individuals how teams, how organizations can develop themselves, can be able to almost better themselves in many ways. So that's our practice and what we're interested in doing. We work across many different organizations, some of which we've listed in the bottom there. And we're really delighted to say that we are, globally recognized top 20 for the last 10 years through training industry, and also regularly receive Brandon Hall for the work that we do. And yeah, it's lovely to be here sharing the space with you today. So that's a bit about impact and a bit about the work we do. As I say, at the end of this session, we wanted to provide a toolkit full of top tips, things that you can take away with you, things that you can use yourself. Before we get into that, though, just to help frame a little bit more about the work we do and sort of a point of view around change, I'm just going to invite Steve now to think about that.
Thanks, Tom. Hi, everyone. Just wanted to sort of frame the way that we at Impact look at change, and it's really a function of how we look at everything, which, as Dom mentioned, is looking at really how can we liberate human potential in our organizations and in the groups that we work in. Starting from the fact that, look, we recognize and we know that you've seen lots of statistics on this. There's no contention coming from us. Changes can be complex and it's really hard to do. There's nothing that is easy or simple about it. And quite frankly, most organizations don't have a change-ready culture. I think you'll find that asking around internally, you'll find that talking with others out in the space. And so I don't think that we need to convince you of any of these things. This is sort of our starting point. We know that change is a constant. In the first session, you saw some dizzying statistics about how rapidly things are moving and changing and our perceptions of that change. Importantly, that we're no longer in a place where we see waves of change coming and we can plan accordingly through strategic plans that are 1 to 3 years or 3 to 5 years. We're having to recognize that the change is constant. And so the way that we adapt has to be constant as well. We have a way of thinking about that. Change only succeeds if people are engaged. It's fundamentally, we are humans working with and through other humans in an organization, and leadership happens through influence that happens through and with others. And so because of that, impact focuses on the behaviors and the conditions that make change stick. And so we'll talk a bit about how we can get really grounded in what's going on for us as individuals, but also what's going on in the context. What do our people need? What are the demands of the external environment around us? And how can we make choices every day that are going to be productive and help us to move forward? So we wanted to be able to pause with you a bit today and unpack some of that through some dialogue and through some conversation that's very grounded in humanity. As you'll see here on this next slide, we've actually organized our point of view on leadership around these 3 ideas. First, that leadership is human. Second, that leadership is fundamentally about action, and I'll explain more about that in just a moment. And third, that leadership is very tied up with learning. You cannot talk about leadership over the long term without talking about the learning that needs to take place in order to continue to be successful in the long run. I'll ask Dom to step back in to talk to us about in what ways change is a human process.
Thank you, Steve. So stands to pass, if we're believing that we're connecting leadership to change, then if we're talking about leadership as being a human process, then we need to talk about change as a human process. And one of the fundamental things that we believe as a philosophy around change is that people will own what they create. So effectively, what that means is during moments of change, the more that you can activate and work with people to be engaged with that process, not just thinking about what they need to do, but why they need to do it and also how they need to do it. So that fundamental idea of their being able to be brought into this process of working things out, learning together, learning socially, versus what might sometimes tend to happen is that other parts of an organization will do a lot of the working out of how things are going to happen. And then that's sometimes cascaded or mandated through the organization. So the more you can activate people in the ownership of that process, the better. Secondly, and this is always a great reminder by the great Peter Senge, is that we believe that people don't necessarily resist that process of change. They might resist that feeling of being changed. So, what it feels like when you are told, just get on with it, just do it. I can't lose track of the number of times that we work in organizations during that ideation process, in that phase where people come to us and they say, well, we've worked out what we need to do. And the problem is people just need to get on with it. That moment is such a great indication of the implicit in that line, people just need to get on with it, sometimes is, well, they're intentionally not. And they're intentionally not is sometimes there that people think, well, it's, they're just resisting it. They just need to get on with it. It's their problem. They don't. And underneath that, I think, is a really interesting indication. Have we done enough to do that thing on the left to involve people in that ownership of understanding the process around that? And because we're working at this point of humans are wonderful, brilliant, emotive, angry sometimes, beautiful, kind, caring, but we're a whole gambit of all of these things, sometimes in just the course of one day. And that can be messy and that can, not go in a linear way. So as much as we work at the process end of change to work out, yes, this is what we need to do, and we come up with our plans, the constancy part of what we're talking about here is that humans are wonderful things that are constantly evolving and changing at the same time. And that can sometimes feel a bit stressful. So this is our thinking around here, that change is a deeply human process. Change also requires leadership action. Steve's going to pick up this slide here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that fundamentally the important point here really is just that at Impact, we define leadership not as a special kind of person or a role or position within the hierarchy, no matter how much authority that brings with us. In fact, we see leadership as a special and vital type of action that can be performed by anyone in the organization. And organizations that aren't able to adapt to this way of thinking will find themselves with people waiting around for decisions to be made, not feeling particularly empowered or able to empower others. And just fundamentally in an organization and in a context in which change is constant, this is going to be too slow for us to move. And so we have a model for this at Impact, which is organized around the idea of noticing, both within yourself and in your context, what is needed in a particular moment as a leader. What does the moment require in terms of why are we getting stuck? What's keeping us from moving forward? Recognizing in the context what might be contributing to that. Then deciding what needs to be done about it. How that could be accomplished, who might need to be involved. And then importantly, we're actually pretty good at getting the noticing and deciding bits done, but mustering the courage to, in fact, act on that and to speak up and speak out and say something or do something, in fact, that is going to help to get us unstuck. This is where a lot of times we get tripped up. And I think an important point here from a leadership standpoint is that it's not just about myself having the courage to act, but as I mentioned, everyone in the organization should feel empowered to act, and it's our responsibility to create the psychological safety that others are able to act with a lower barrier in terms of the courage that's required to act in any given moment. We, of course, reflect on how our actions met the intended effect, and then we continue on and we look for the next opportunity to notice, decide, and act with leadership action.
And we're not going to do a deep dive into this today, but thanks for framing that, Steve. And if you're interested, we have a downloadable paper, a playbook that you can take a look at. That's from our website. But we wanted to share more around the top tips around change. The final point, linking back to our point of view here around if leadership indeed is about human action and learning, therefore we must think of change in that way as well. And change being all about learning. And a neat little way in which we phrase this at Impact is that we think about learning as a nuanced way. It's not just a ubiquitous, everything needs to be learned. If we can focus fundamentally on the work that we are doing, we can think about change as either people involved in that change, learning to do work differently, and or learning to do different work. And what we mean by that really is if they're doing work differently, the output of what they're doing, the actual product, the work that they're doing is going to be the same. They're just approaching it now in a different way. So a new process, a new system, a new IT system. We're still doing the same work here, but we're just implementing these new processes and systems. And that is a slightly different thing that activates in people if we are thinking about actually we're going to be now doing different work. So we're opening up a completely new product stream. We are opening up a completely new market that we've never worked in before. So that requires a slightly different way in which we might need to think about that, both requiring new skill sets and mindsets, but fundamentally requiring a process of learning. And I think that, when we think about the work that we do, the constancy now of change happening at a rate of knots, we must embed that learning into the process of the work that is happening in the organizations. It's not just an event or a project or a webinar or something that people can attend to learn about. It must be a constancy to think about the propensity to keep learning in an organization. So that's the first share of our slides where we just wanted to bring to life a little bit about our point of view. But what we wanted to do now is activate again our chat functionality and have a bit more of a conversation with you guys. And the way we wanted to do this is by inviting you all to think about, if you could, a current change project that you are involved in currently. It could be that you are leading on that process of the change project. It might be that you are part of a working group that's doing this. But the key is what we'd invite you to do is think about the specificity of this. So rather than just that kind of catch-all term of the change that is happening right now, no, be granular about this. Think about what this is, because again, there are many nuanced, different moments of change happening all around us in organizations. So can you identify and think about a specific one that you are working on? And as we do this with you online, I'm also going to model this and do this with Steve. And this is a way in which we can start to introduce that toolkit that we're about to share with you. But Steve, have you got one that you can think about?
Yes, absolutely. It's quite recent, and it involves many of the elements that we've been talking about. Yeah.
Perfecto. Okay. What I'm now going to invite you to do, and this is often thought about as probably not best practice and something that is going a bit rogue, but I'm going to invite you to open up a different screen now. Hopefully it's not going to not going to ping you out too much and start getting you thinking about different things. I do want you to remain present, but the invitation is for you to actually open up your calendar. So take a look in your Outlook, in your Teams, in your Google, wherever you have your working calendar. And can you think about a specific moment or a working week where you got to the end of that week and you were just like, oh my God, I've hit Friday and I really needed that. That's been a bit of a killer of a week. That was something that I wasn't quite expecting. Things just didn't necessarily go in the way that they were meant to go, or maybe at the end of that week you were perhaps feeling a little bit tired, a little bit hopefully not burnt out. But that idea of often when we're working at pace at a rate of knots, we can fall over if we're not protecting and looking after ourselves. That's an entirely different webinar altogether. But just the part of this experiment is just to open up and have a look at that calendar and think about now looking at the time that was spent during that week. Just note for yourself, you're thinking about a current change project. You're looking back maybe 2-3 weeks in the past. You've entered your DeLorean. You've gone back in time. Don't just look at that space. I want you to try and really, and forgive us for doing this, we're asking you to think about, what did it feel like in that space? How much time were you spent working on that piece of change work? How much time did and business as usual take over? And you'll note I'm intentionally doing the bunny ears here because often, again, our contention is in the flow of the work that we do. Partly one of the biggest challenges around leading in this space of change is not about capability, but it's more about the capacity that we intentionally commit to working in this way. So I hope that that's happened. As you're just maybe thinking about that, Um, Open up the chat, and I'm just going to invite you to think, how did it feel in that week? How did it feel in the most crunchy moments? How did it feel maybe when you hit the end of that week and you got to Friday? We know you're good at sharing because you've told us all about the love of Ted Lasso and other TV programs and film stuff. So please open up the chat again. During that sort of quite crunchy week that you were in, when the change was working on, how did that feel? Hey, thanks, Sadia there. Lots of
Thanks, Sadia.
uncertainty. Yeah, hands up in the air.
Fun. Okay. Some people love
Okay.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah. It can be every week. Yep. I'm with you, Kelly.
absolutely.
Exhausting. Draining. Yeah.
And Steve, as we're just hearing from our colleagues who are sharing here, let's just talk about your week. So just share very quick top line. What was it that you had been asked to do? Tell us about that.
Yeah, there's been a big push at Impact to get more intentional and focused around the great work that we do with these sort of long-standing partnerships. And so there's an opportunity to begin working with a new potential client. And so we're really doubling down on our efforts to put our best foot forward for an RFP process. And from my standpoint, it felt like it was suddenly put in my lap, right? There were other people who were holding it, and for lots of reasons of schedule conflicts and people going out on vacation and whatnot, it became my project to lead, which I get, and I'm happy to do that for the org. But it did feel a little bit like this huge, overwhelming thing that was not mine, and suddenly it was, and it was as important as anything
Landed
else
on
we were
your
doing.
plate.
Yeah, yeah,
And if you think about then, so if you go back and if you've got your calendar and you can have a look at that and you've thought about
yeah.
that, what, how much time would you say that you were able to spend working on that versus the actual kind of guess flow of the work that you'd already got in
Sure.
place?
Yeah, I mean that's interesting because when I look back at my calendar for that week, I was just mentioning in the chat that it fills me with anxiety just to think about it. But it was really taking up all of the spaces in between any of the meetings that I had, and so that would end up being sort of anywhere between an additional 15 to 25 hours that I had not planned for at the beginning of that month. And yeah, it was overwhelming. I think that the feeling of it was more exhausting than the actual doing of it, if that makes sense.
Mm.
There was this
Um,
weight to it. Yeah.
what did you feel helped as well?
Yeah. When I got to a place where I started to talk with other people about how I was receiving it or how I was experiencing it, things started to unlock a bit because help started to arrive from unexpected places as well. People's support came out of the woodworks. It was because it's a global project. There are a lot of people who didn't have visibility to what we were trying to do, and me making clear not only what is the task and what's in front of us, but also what do I need in that moment, and how am I.
Yeah.
How do I need to mitigate a bit of what was going on for me at the time? You have to get a bit vulnerable, right? I found myself, quite honestly, if I were to put a name on the feeling, apart from anxiety and overwhelm, I felt kind of resentful, to be honest. I not directed at anyone in particular, but just at the universe, I guess. That this felt like
Hmm.
something was happening to me, and
But it wasn't being
it
asked to come and help co-present the global webinar here, was it? No.
no, no,
Oh,
no.
good. Thank goodness
It
for
was
that.
definitely not this.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is an element to this where once I could get out of this loop that I was in with the story that I was telling myself about this, right? Then
Yeah.
I was able to start to like plug into other people and to really make sense of it together and co-create of what's possible now, type of a way of thinking forward.
Yeah, it's such an important one, right? And it's demonstrating there that these things suddenly hit us and narratives spew out of us all the time. Like why, like I just heard from you, frustrated, why has this come onto my plate?
Yeah,
I'm the person that has to fix this. Maybe there's other people that weren't necessarily being brought in. It came quite last minute, I heard as well. And that
yeah,
all may be true as well, but it's also I guess not intentional as to why that suddenly hit there and why that happened in that way.
yeah.
And it's just an interesting take on this idea of stories that we tell ourselves, and that we can kind of
Yeah.
fall into those traps of narratives. And I guess that helps set us up
Yeah.
for thinking about, I guess, this is something that we created. I've worked on this with an organization. And I guess some of the things that we've just helped to model there, hopefully, this idea of what really matters sometimes in these processes and in these moments is that human moment of actually being able to
Right.
share. And thanks for recognizing that in the chat there, Serena, as well. And thank you for sharing that, Stephen.
Yeah.
That it is yeah, these things matter. Finding space, finding time to recognize that yourself, to be able to share that with others, to be able to sense make, to work with others. So we've identified this as these 10 tips, and thanks everyone for sharing here. So we're just going to go ahead and bring up some more slides just to share these with you now, by way of hopefully some practical tips that you can take away with you. So Steve, I'm just going to ask you to start to share those. Is that sharing again for everyone? Who's
Not yet.
in charge of
There.
technology?
Now it's coming. There it is. Great.
Yeah.
So again, these are 10 behaviors, right? And importantly, some tips for leading through change and things that we can do on an everyday basis to sort of check in with ourselves. And importantly, I know that most people on this call are also working with others who are expected to be leading and driving change, and sometimes helping them to connect with their emotions on the one hand, as Dom just helped me as he talked that through. Some of that resentment and the feeling that I was having of being overwhelmed and a bit helpless in those moments had to do with again these stories that I was telling myself. So the second one, besides connecting with your emotions, is reflecting on how you're showing up. I actually noticed that I was becoming a bit stubborn and resistant in the way that I was showing up with others, and that was what helped me to recognize something has to shift here, because that's not who I am. That's not how I generally show up. There must be something going on under the surface that is deeper than what I've described. So again, as we mentioned, looking beyond the easy story, it wasn't just that this was a hard thing. We've had harder projects, and I'm constantly leading global projects. That wasn't what it was. There was something about why I was telling myself that story. And frankly, it had a lot to do with what other things that were going on in my life at that time. My son's about to go off to college, and I've got all kinds of feelings about that separation anxiety and things like this, that make you question, did I teach him everything that he needs to know as a parent? And all of those moments of imposter syndrome that show up in the workplace, because I know that every coachee I've ever worked with has said that they experience that, can be triggered by what's happening in our personal lives, and just recognizing that there's some of that we need help and coaching through to understand. Reframing those setbacks as learning is another important tip here, and behavior, because none of this is something that is wrong with me or the way that anybody else is working, but we can definitely understand how did things happen the way that they did, and what can I do better to make sure that I don't get mired and stuck in the future. Noticing what my team needs the most now, and in this moment, it was clarity from me, and understanding how they could support. People are not mind readers, right? So you need to be able to make it really clear to folks what you need and what you're looking for. Additionally, communicating with clarity and care, I think those go hand in hand with what we mentioned previously. But also, if there's a rollout that's involved in the change and we know when we'll have more information, let's make that clear. If we know that we won't have more information for any time in the near future, let's make that clear too. This is really important for people to feel like they're being kept in the loop and brought along. Fostering psychological safety, as I mentioned earlier, it's critically important if you're expecting people to speak up, if you're expecting them to be vulnerable, if you're expecting them to feel comfortable questioning when they don't quite understand the rationale for something. If you want people bought in and owning the processes, you really need them to feel like they have been a part of understanding and deciding to move forward. Number 8 is connecting with people and don't letting anyone drift. Really be noticing how engaged people are. Really be noticing what kinds of messaging or feedback you're hearing from people, because it can be so easy to assume that because nobody raised their hand and asked any challenging questions, that everyone's on board. Of course, they're not all necessarily on board, and you need to make sure that you're helping people to sense make while you're also addressing where their concerns and their emotions are coming from. Paying attention to the nonverbal as well as the verbal cues is really important. Got a lot of introverts on most teams, and even the extroverts don't always feel comfortable sharing in the large group. So make sure that you're looking out for that. and being open to listen and learn and not just fix and win. Super important here. It's really easy when you have an agenda to be looking at each interaction as here's what I need to get out of this, here's the message I need to share. But you have to be open to learning along the way, hearing from other people, and really changing your own viewpoint in the way that you're making sense of it in terms of what is needed next.
Thanks,
Dom, I
Steve.
think, yeah, go
And
ahead.
yeah, I think it's much more information on this as you download it at the end of this session. You've got a QR
Yeah.
code that will take you to a site. You can have a look in detail, top tips, some questions and things to work on. But just as a cursory glance, first time hearing this, go ahead in the chat now. Which number, I guess, is the one that you feel resonates most with you when you're working through change? What have you found to be the thing that you're sort of drawn to here that you think is going to be best for you or works best for you? Thanks, Jennifer. Straight in there, yeah. Super, super, super. Thank you. And I guess
Yeah.
one of the things that you'll see when you look at the toolkit is actually there is so much interplay and sort of a way in which these are feeding into each other. It's hard to think about any of this really unless you start with number one as a sort of process to sort of start to think and reframe and work on these. But great, I guess, and thanks for sharing that. And the sort of question then I'm interested in you reflecting on and thinking on for those who have shared and those who have thought about this is we know this stuff, but how much of it are you doing? How much of this are you actually able to implement, to put into practice? How much of this are you able to find time, as we've just experienced previously as well? Because during those kind of stressy moments, if we just go back to some of the words you guys used, exhausting, draining, overwhelming, what's next? Fun, sometimes smothering. But we get kind of caught in the habits and the structures that we've put in place where I guess our suggestion, really, an offer to you as a guide for what we find working through change is that this works best when we're intentional about it. When we find a way in which we can start to embed it into our everyday practice as leaders, but we can start to embed it into the habits and flows of our working practice as well. So, in a moment, we're going to invite you to do just that. But what we wanted to do quickly now is just share a bit of a deep dive about how we've used some of these with some of our clients and our partners and our different organizations that we've had a chance to work with. So
Yeah, Dom, I wonder if you could share with us an example from your practice of instances where some of these have come up. Let's start with the first one, connecting with your emotions. Have you got an example of some work you've done with a client where this sort of was really brought to life within those sessions?
I have, yes. And I'm going to share with you, actually, I'm going to
Serendipity.
pick the same client actually for all of this because I think it's really,
Yeah,
really relevant and it works with this. This was
yeah.
a huge merger that's just taken place with an organization in the UK. They are a food manufacturing company and two essentially of the biggest organizations in that space working in the UK. In fact, partly global, one of them was as well. Back of all Green Corps, they came together. There was this big merger that happened at the beginning of this year. We were there supporting the senior teams, the senior leaders to work through this space effectively going, I think it's up to about 36,000 people now in the organization. So this massive sort of merger was taking place. Very clearly not a takeover. They were both very competitive in their space. One just raised the capital and were able to acquire and buy the other one. We worked with these entire 10 tips as we worked with that top team, including the CEO, the top 150 leaders. This one was a really powerful starting point. Particularly during that quite gnarly phase of an integration process where everything's a bit up in the air and nobody's really clear where they're going to land and where they're going to sit in the organization. Finding a space and time, literally, to be able to come in and socially share that was a really important point. So being able to sit, to listen, to recognize actually, we're going to talk about how things are not just going at the moment, but how are they feeling as a different type of question. So just being able to sit and share in that space and recognize, as we've done constantly with our chats today, there's massive difference going on from super excited. Can't wait to get going. This is going to be brilliant too. I'm a bit overwhelmed here. I'm a bit nervous. What does this mean for my team? How can I recognize this? And simply just having a space to share that was wonderful. Didn't need to jump into, well, I'm feeling great, so I'm going to try and fix you, or I'm feeling bad, so I need your help. But it was just a simple space of sharing that. So that was one of the great exercises, the great moments actually during that integration where we worked with them. This was a brilliant moment where we asked them to think about the stories that they used to tell about each other's organization. So, we think that you do it like this, or we think that you do it like this, and actually being able to recognize a lot of that was hearsay, a lot of that was bias, a lot of that wasn't necessarily happening, but there was an enormous amount of similarity as well, which was great when they recognized that they were doing things in much of the same ways. But also the stories that they felt when they were about to come together. Oh, you're just going to come in and tell us it has to be like this, or this is your way of doing it. This is our way of doing it. So lots of things to think about in terms of those stories that we were able to surface there. And lastly, as I mentioned before, this really open space to really listen and learn, not just jump in and fix straight away. So some brilliant work done up front to help with some guiding principles here, but just resisting the urge to sort of jump in straight away, come up with sort of new operating processes, new values, new systems. We don't need to necessarily box everything off. It sometimes needs us just to slow down a bit and to connect and to learn. So our invitation to you is we've just had a look at these 10. Look ahead. If we've gone in your DeLorean back in time, let's now go forward in time. And we're going to ask you to think about 3 weeks in the future. If you've got your calendar still open, I think it's really good to actually practically do this rather than just think about this. Open them up and think about what what can you actually do that might intentionally start to bring some of these 10 into your practice? It might be that as I approach this meeting, when you look at the toolkit in detail, there's lots of top tips. It might be I'm gonna really just focus on bringing others in, so they're going to speak, or I'm gonna find a moment in time at the end of the week to really just review and reflect, and I'm gonna hold that in my calendar and not let it be taken out. So look ahead in your calendar. What can you do to intentionally find that capacity to work in that way? Conscious we're running towards the end. So there's the QR code to get access to a download of the toolkit in detail. And it's just become a loving for Ted Lasso, your chat, which I'm here for. Thank you for all of that. But if you do have any
Great.
comments, any questions,
Yep.
please pop them in. And I'm conscious we have a few minutes left to maybe answer those
Yep.
as well. Or please just share any
Li-
comments. Really. I think that's also really interesting. Your thoughts
Also,
are much very. The QR code's not working. Oh, good. That's a thing that I wasn't expecting to be happening. Oh,
there's a
look at
link
it
to the
in the
toolkit there,
chat.
and we'll follow up with it. Maybe just as we're
Oh, you
waiting
get
for
error.
others to
There we go,
populate
Sochi. Some people's did work.
to
So hopefully it's maybe just a setting on your phone. Other people
go
have
ahead
accessed it.
go ahead and keep on entering into the chat. I'm just going to take up Lindsay's question here up above, where she's really talking about working in an organization where emotional intelligence and connecting with others and talking about your emotions isn't really valued as a business focused type of a activity or skill set. What have you found that works with organizations like this that are quite resistant to the idea of these sort of squishier, softer topics, though? Part of the way that we look at them in the work that we do is to make sure that we are creating spaces for people to begin to explore that a bit. So that might not always be in the meeting where decisions are being made, right? We might need to create some separate space. When we're on a leadership development program, that's easier to do because you can create smaller groups and have them facilitated for building rapport and getting them to disclose with one another. I think in those points where humans are connecting one to another, you really can't resist the idea that there's some value in being able to share across. What we tend to do in our immersive experiences that we share with folks, whether it's on a leadership development program or it's on an offsite, is we try to get people to start showing up with some of the disruption and sort of reactions to challenge that you might expect that most people do. And as we do that, sorry, I'm noticing the time too, Dom. I see your face of like, we're running right to it. But I think the important thing is getting them to recognize how they're showing up in the moment. So some in the moment coaching with them can be really helpful. I don't think that this is a tell type of thing. I think we need to draw it out of people through experience. Sometimes that takes multiple engagements, but it's definitely worth the time and investment spent.
Yeah, thanks, Steve, and thank everybody for just being here. Hey, apologies if we didn't do proper Q&A stuff, but we wanted to share this in detail for you all, and your comments have been really great, and uh, good luck. Good luck with everything that you're all working on, and I do hope that you'll be in touch. We're the lovely people from Impact, and we'd love to hear from you. So many thanks for being here.
Thank
Back to
you
you,
so much,
Elizabeth.
Stephen. Great session. I really enjoyed those 10 tips for leading through change. I thought that was really helpful. So, again, thanks for those insights and for being with us. Everybody else, we've got one more session together, and I hope you'll stick around. We've got about a 15-minute break. Our next session is brought to us by Canvas Leadership. They'll be talking about what if preparing leaders for change is yesterday's leadership challenge. Intriguing. So I hope you'll stick around and I will meet you there.